For centuries, the Orkney Isles of Scotland have been plagued by a horrifying beast, a skinless demon that presents itself as having a full body of a horse with a human torso attached to its back. Welcome to Below the Forest Floor. My name is Nancy, and I am here with my husband/co-host Ryan.
Hello.
Today we will be discussing the Orcadian mythological creature, the Nuckelavee. The Nuckelavee isn't your typical boogeyman. Although bringing destruction to anyone in its path is its main purpose, it also plays an important role in being one of the very first explanations of Orcadian mythology for how weather affects the general public. You see, back before science was a big thing, people tried to figure out why things happened the way they did. Why did the sun rise? Why was it cold some months and hot during others? Why do storms happen? Etc. These questions led to the birth of gods, goddesses, and monsters like the one in today's story. The sea and water itself played a huge role in Orcadian mythology because the Scottish see water as the boundary between the supernatural and the world we as humans know. Because of this, there are many Scottish stories that include water beasts, and the Nuckelavee is exactly that. This creature lives in the water throughout the summer and spring months. Not because it wants to, though. It is actually being held back by Mither. Mither is the almighty mother of the sea that has to fight the terrifying Turan every autumn to see who will control winter. Turan is the personification of winter in spirit form. Though, unfortunately, year after year since the beginning of time, Mither loses the battle and goes off to rest, while Turan rules during the winter months. This loss allows Nuckelavee to run free, causing mayhem and destruction in his path. He kills man and animals and crops. Although I haven't read anywhere how he kills the humans or livestock, some stories say that he kills the crops with his breath. No one is safe from his grasp, unless, of course, you have fresh water with you. We'll talk about this later, though. Since Turan is an explanation of winter, then the battle is a representation of the seasons changing, and it could mean that the Nuckelavee is the hardships that winter brings.
And the Nuckelavee definitely sounds like it's just another version of the Headless Horseman, but it's actually so much more. Not only is the Nuckelavee a skinless horse with a skinless man attached to its back, it's wildly misshapen. The part of it that's human has arms that are so long they nearly reach the ground, and its head is so big that it dangles off to one side because its neck is too weak to hold it up. On top of all that, the horse is a cyclops, so it's just got one eye. It has one giant red gleaming eye in the middle of its face, along with fins sprouting from its legs.
I think that sounds absolutely terrifying, and I would never want to see this in person.
Yeah, me neither. I'm even a big buff on mythology and stuff, and I probably wouldn't want to see this.
Although this is the first time I'd personally heard of this creature, he has made appearances in modern media. The show Grimm had him make an appearance in Season 2, Episode 4 as an entire species of them. I think I even saw one sitting in a cop car and it transformed. It was kind of weird.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah. It shook his head and the head started turning into like a horse-like thing. It was weird. And in the anime, or the American animation show Ruby, the Nuckelavee appeared in Volume 4 as an antagonist. How about you, Ryan? When was the first time you heard about this terrible creature of the deep?
Just when we were recording our last episode, and when I had mentioned it and thought that it was interesting and we should do an episode about it, that was the first time I'd ever heard anything about it. So that was it.
Oh, awesome. Well, I guess we're both going to be learning a lot today. The very first recorded writing of the Nuckelavee was written in 1891 by Walter Child Dennison. Walter was a farmer and a collector of local folk stories. While living on the Orkney island of Sunday, he managed to collect enough local lore to publish a couple of books, including one called the Orcadian Sketchbook, which was later republished and translated in the 90s and is now under the title Orkney Folklore. Fun fact, its lowest price is listed at $75 at the moment, with the highest being almost in the 300s. During Walter's time of collecting, he came across a man named Tomas, who is said to have been the very first eyewitness to come face to face with the Nuckelavee and live to tell the tale. His story went like this.
Tomas, like his namesake Tom O'Shanter, was out late one night. It was, though moonless, a fine starlit night. Tomas's road lay close by the seashore, and as he entered a part of the road that was hemmed in on one side by the sea and on the other by the deep freshwater loch, he saw some huge object in front of and moving towards him. What was he to do? He was sure it was no earthly thing that was steadily coming towards him. He could not go to either side, and to turn his back to an evil thing he had heard was one of the most dangerous position of all. So Tomas said to himself, "The Lord be about me, and take care of me, as I am on no evil intent this night." Tomas was always regarded as rough and foolhardy. Anyway, he determined, as the best of two evils, to face the foe, and so he walked resolutely yet slowly forward. He soon discovered to his horror that the gruesome creature approaching him was none other than the dreaded Nuckelavee, the most cruel and malignant of all uncanny beings that trouble mankind. The lower part of this terrible monster, as seen by Tomas, was like a great horse, with flapper-like fins about its legs, with a mouth as wide as a whale's, from which came breath like steam from a brewing kettle. It had but one eye, and that is red as fire. On him sat, or rather seemed to grow from his back, a huge man with no legs and arms that reached nearly to the ground. His head was as big as the clue of Simmons, and this huge head kept rolling from one shoulder to the other as if it were meant to tumble off. But what to Tomas appeared most horrible of all was that the monster was skinless, his utter want of skin adding much to the terrific appearance of the creature's naked body. The whole surface of it was showing only red, raw flesh, in which Tomas saw blood black as tar running through yellow veins and great white sinews thick as horse tethers. It was twisting, stretching, contracting as the monster moved. Tomas went slowly on in mortal terror, his hair on end, a cold sensation like a film of ice between his scalp and his skull, and a cold sweat bursting from every pore. But he knew it was useless to flee from this creature, and he said if he had to die, he would rather see who killed him than die with his back to a foe. In all of his terror, Tomas remembered what he had heard of Nuckelavee's dislike of fresh water, and therefore took the side of the road nearest to the loch. The awful moment came when the lower head of the monster got abreast of Tomas. The mouth of the monster yawned like a bottomless pit. Tomas found its hot breath like fire on his face. The long arms were stretched out to seize the unhappy man. To avoid, if possible, the monster's clutch, Tomas swerved as near as he could to the loch. In doing so, on one of his feet went into the loch, splashing up some water on the foreleg of the monster, whereas the horse gave a snort like thunder and sheered over to the other side of the road. And Tomas felt the wind of Nuckelavee's clutches as he narrowly escaped the monster's grip. Tomas saw his opportunity and ran with all his might, the sore need he had had to run. For Nuckelavee had turned and was galloping after him, and bellowing with a sound like the roaring of the sea. In front of Tomas lay a rivulet, through which the surface of water of the loch found its way to the sea. Tomas knew if he could only cross the running water, he was safe, so he strained on every nerve. As he reached the near bank, another clutch was made at him by the long arms. Tomas made a desperate spring and reached to the other side, leaving his bonnet in the monster's clutches. The Nuckelavee gave a wild, unearthly yell of disappointed rage as Tomas fell senseless on the side of the road, the safe side of the water.
If you would like to hear more Orkney tales, be sure to check out orkneyjar.com, where we were able to find the original Nuckelavee and Tomas story. I can't imagine how afraid Tomas must have been to see such a creature, and he actually had enough sense to think about a way to get away from him. Isn't that insane?
That is, in those moments, the fight or flight, so it makes your brain work so much faster that it's interesting that the thing that came up in his mind was the thing about the freshwater that he had heard before. But I haven't heard anything about this story until we started looking it up.
Right, and the way it made it sound, or the way it seemed was that they had spoken of this before, and he's heard many a story to have remembered something like that so clearly when he spotted it.
I wonder where it started. If he had heard so many stories about it or anything to remember things like this, I wonder where it kind of originated from even further on than that, than anything that we were able to find.
That would be amazing to find out someday, honestly. Something I found extremely interesting is the fact that one of the biggest weaknesses of Nuckelavee is water, although he comes from the sea, which is salt water. It's just so strange to me that he's opposed to fresh water, or I guess running water, but I do have a couple of theories on this personally. My first one is a bit less on the supernatural side, which could be just like with saltwater fish, they cannot be put in fresh water because they will die. And no, I'm not saying it's for the same reasons a fish would die, because the fish dies from its cells expanding in the fresh water, and I don't think that would happen to Nuckelavee. But I am just thinking that it may have been one of those explanatory things, like with why winter happens, and instead it was like with fish. Why can't this kid bring the fish from that they found in the sea over here in the fresh water? But in this case, why saltwater beings don't mix well with fresh water. My second theory is a bit more supernatural, though. Since in the Orkney culture it is believed that where the sea meets the land is a veil of sorts, maybe freshwater, still water, or water that is from a river, could have cleansing properties to it that could keep the evil beings away, almost like holy water that's been blessed by a priest. Water has been a part of cleansing rituals since the beginning of time for all sorts of religions and practices, so I'm guessing that maybe that's why a demon would fear water. Because
And
yeah, it didn't make it seem like it was burning or something.
yeah, it's and to go off of that, water has been something that's like kind of like a deterrent for a lot of these different things in mythology, going all the way back to, good God, it's been a long, like, some of the beginning stories you hear about, even stuff from the Bible, I want to say, talking about, I guess it just kind of goes back to the holy water thing that you said already.
Which honestly would make sense. I don't know how or why that was a thing in this culture, but maybe we could look up more on that later. We'll just have like a whole below the forest floor episode on water.
Yeah, just the supernatural properties of water would be an interesting episode to do altogether.
I was honestly joking. I thought you might think that sounded silly, but I mean, we could do that.
Well, it's kind of it's a thread that kind of ties a lot of these stories together, so
That's true.
it could be a good one for like a season finale episode, tying everything together.
Oh, I kind of like that a lot. But funny enough, fresh running water isn't the only thing that could keep the Nuckelavee away, though. Burning seaweed can also do the trick. This could be another one of those cleansing rituals, like how in many other religions and cultures, smoke has cleansing properties. That's why so many people use burning incense, sage, herbs, wood, whatever, to cleanse their homes and sacred spaces. And I don't know if you've seen it, but they use smoke to cleanse places almost in every story and in real life.
Yeah, and I think that the burning seaweed just kind of has a bit of that to do with it as well, which would be interesting to look up a little bit more into that as well.
I remember that when I first mentioned this to you, you were telling me that you thought maybe that the smell was also something that could make it feel like, I guess, that fear.
Oh yeah, because of it kind of being like its home in a sort, because of it being a water demon.
Which would also be really interesting. I do wonder about that, and I wonder if any other religions still burn seaweed for the same reasons or for something similar, because I've only ever seen people burning all the other things I mentioned, but I didn't know people used to burn seaweed for this reason. I should actually look that up.
I'm gonna look up real fast while you're saying this next part.
Sounds good to me.
So have you heard anything about why kelp is a very interesting thing? Because apparently burning seaweed creates kelp.
What?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. The shallow waters surrounding Orkney, the sloping beaches, tremendous sea storms made the islands an ideal place to harvest kelp. So it would be the burning of seaweed to make kelp was carried out in Orkney from the early 18th century until the early years of the 19th century. at which time the industry went into a decline. That's interesting.
That really is. Do you think maybe that could have been like another story that comes about with Nuckelavee? Like Nuckelavee got them to destroy their own crops and stuff, like the seaweed?
Yeah. I wonder if this was something to do. I wonder if this story was kind of around the time of the decline with this thing. So it was something that because all I'm seeing is the remains of a series of kelp pits at the Nesselbra in Sanday, which is the same place that this happened at.
Dun
I
dun
I
dun.
wonder if the industry, quote unquote, of creating kelp by burning seaweed, this was maybe the supernatural reason for why they were making kelp, or the fact that like this monster was kind of like the reason for the decline, or maybe like that was the story that they put to the decline of their industry of burning seaweed to make kelp.
That's insane. I didn't even know that. I hadn't even thought to put two and two together, honestly, until we started recording this.
Yeah. Oh, haha. Found something else on this page too. So I'm looking at actually orkneyjar.com, the tradition of kelp burning, the one that you had linked on here. Eager to make the most of his position, a man named Meldrum was brought to Orkney. He tried to convince the locals that only he knew of the magic words, and he had enough of the magic powder to make seaweed burn thoroughly. Although superstitious, the Orcadians were no fools and paid little heed to the Meldrum's wild claims. That's interesting.
That actually is. That's pretty freaking insane. That definitely sounds like it goes hand in hand. I wonder if okay, so they say that the folklore is really, really old. What if this guy heard the story and he found out that one of the ways that they keep these creatures away from hurting them is burning the seaweed, and so he decided to kind of use this as a trick and to use people's fears against them?
That, and the Nuckelavee could not stand the smell of the pungent smoke from burning seaweed. It was said to drive him into an extreme diabolical rage in which he would smite the horses on Stronsay with a deadly disease known as mortashine.
I wonder if the horses were getting sick from the seaweed smell like entering their lungs, and that's what they assumed was the answer.
Yeah, and once propagated, mortashine would spread over all the islands where kelp was made. Huh.
Wow, that's crazy.
Interesting.
Yeah, it actually really is. And another interesting theory that I've heard is that some people believe that the Nuckelavee could be a type of fairy, like a fae or elf.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of Celtic fae, basically, like the Dullahan, the actual
Mhm.
headless horseman. He's a fae. I would see no reason why this one is not a fae, though. Really, a water fae, definitely.
Fae and elves are usually associated with evil or mischief, and that really goes along these lines of the Nuckelavee's personality. And a fun tidbit that could back this up is that the name Nuckelavee actually derives from the name Nugel, a water spirit that presents itself to humans as a horse.
It's interesting. I was gonna look up a picture of a Noogle.
You know what else is interesting? Speaking of horses, we just actually finished talking about horses being affected by the seaweed.
Yeah.
I wonder if that has anything to do with each other. Like possibly the horse spirit maybe getting angered by the horses dying to the burning of the seaweed.
Yeah, that could definitely be a thing. The Nuckelavee could also have kind of been an angered fae to the burning of seaweed because it's harming horses.
That is a theory.
That's a theory.
To be fair, all of these are theories. That's what we do here on Below the Force Floor.
Oh my goodness, looking at Noogles, I'm finding magic cards. I forgot there were actual like horse people named Noogles that were in Magic. But that's interesting. I feel like that sometimes the end of these episodes is really interesting because we decide to just take a quick dive into something and then we start to expand upon it to the point where we come to some sort of this new idea of things.
Yeah, new theory on what could be like the possibilities. Whether the Nuckelavee still roams the earth or not, he is always welcome down here with us below the forest floor. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Stay tuned for more in the near future. We would like to also thank our forest deity patrons, Lotus Vincent, for your continued support of the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would like to have your name featured at the end of a Below the Forest Floor episode, make sure to become a Forest Deity member on our Patreon today. So we will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.